Welcome back, guys, to another episode here of Off Air with Alex, a show all about the behind-the-scenes lives of politicians, journalists, media folks, influencers, and today we've got a huge rising star in the Pennsylvania Democratic Party, Mr. Malcolm Kenyatta, joining us from Philadelphia. Malcolm, I know you got a busy schedule these days, so thank you for carving out some time to be with us.
Well, happy to do it. Love the show. Excited to be on.
Awesome. So let's start about, first of all, for folks who don't know you, who've never heard your name, which I don't know how that's possible these days, you're the representative for the 181st District out there in Philadelphia, and you just recently announced your candidacy for U.S. Senate. Before we get to that, let's talk about how your day begins. I'm sure a year ago your day was different than it is now, but talk to me about how your day starts. What's it like to be Malcolm Kenyatta?
So my day starts with me trying to get more people to know who I am. But that is my ongoing activity in life. But seriously, my day starts with my little pup. Cleo's around here somewhere. I have a little Frenchie. She has her own little Instagram page. I have nothing to do with it. I do not help. My partner, Dr. Matt, does it all. But it starts with her trying to eat and go outside. And it usually starts very, very early. You know, the state government committee, which I'm on, which is how a lot of people, I think, first came to see me when I was fighting to make sure we counted every vote here in Pennsylvania. That committee oversees everything related to elections in the Commonwealth. And we've been busy. That committee was literally the busiest committee in all of state government in any state last year. We were working overtime and we're still busy. They've decided to conduct a series of 18 different hearings looking at the election and things related to the election. And so I don't usually stay overnight in Harrisburg. I usually come home. And so that means I have to drive in. And so it's 2 hours there, 2 hours back. And so after the dog is gone, I'm on the road.
I love that. Talk to me about when you just decided to get into politics. I know that you, like you said before, I'm going to use some words from your announcement video for U.S. Senate. Government that works for working families. You started working at age 12. You're a big advocate for fighting systemic poverty. Why get into politics, and why even further get into politics with this announcement for U.S. Senate?
You know, I didn't have a choice. You know, so much of what we're talking about and the lives of all working people, because one of the things I also say in the video is my story is actually not that unique. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people who, like me, didn't have ready access to healthcare as a kid. I watched my mom, ration her insulin. Both of my parents have passed, and I wonder all the time would things have been different if she was, able to take care of herself in a better way because she was able to afford it. When we talk about housing, we moved around 4 or 5 different times as a kid. When we talk about wages, I had to work, a starvation level wage job. I worked multiple jobs during college, as well as being involved in a bunch of different things as being just a student to help me with all the different expenses that go beyond tuition. And so all of these issues, I tell people all the time, it's not hypothetical or philosophical to me. These are issues that I understand in my bones. And so my involvement and the involvement of so many people is because we don't have a choice. If we're going to make stories like mine less common, I don't want people to have experiences like I've had. And it's not great. If we're going to fix that, then we're going to have people in government who understand in their bones what's broken, not because they read about it, but because they know it, they've lived it.
And you talked about that in your video, that what's been broken hasn't just been broken for 4 or 5, 6 years. It's been broken for a long time. And I want to also highlight the point that you're the first openly LGBTQ person of color elected to the state assembly or general assembly, which is an amazing feat. So congratulations on that, by the way. I know it's a few years after the fact, but talk to me about putting yourself out there like that to be that person who knows these things in and out and take this to the state capitol. Why take this on and put yourself out there as a target?
You know what? Thank you for saying that. But whenever that's mentioned, it actually makes me really sad that we're in 2021, and I'm still the only one at this point. This is not about empty symbolism. This is about how we make decisions. There are folks who've done great studies on this, looking at it from a business perspective, but organizations that have a variety of different people in decision-making positions who come from a variety of different lived experiences, those organizations make better decisions. And that is certainly true of our government. When you look at the Senate doesn't look like the country. The Senate does not reflect the fullness of the American experience. And that is a part of the reason I think it's often missed the mark in terms of centering, in particular, working people. When the average congressman and senator is a millionaire, then we can't reasonably believe with a level of certainty that they're going to go and advocate for things that affect working people and marginalized people. You know, I've become, frankly, fed up with us. It's seeming like the best that we can do is finding some folks who are able to read talking points and say they're going to care about these things. But then we have to cross our fingers and cross our toes and hope that they actually do that. And they're not just saying those things because they believe it's politically popular. The things that I fight for and advocate for are things that I know. I talk about things that directly affect people in my, community, affect people in my family, affect people I love and care about. And so I'm in this because those voices need to be centered. They need to be centered in our body politic. And I think it's going to make better policy for us.
Explain to me, in your view, not to pit you against Mr. Fetterman, who we all know and enjoy seeing on television, why you might be a better candidate for the Democratic nomination for U.S. Senate whenever this comes up. Why you over Mr. Fetterman?
So voters are smart, and I'll leave it to them to make a decision. But I'll tell you what I think voters are looking for. I think they're looking for authenticity. I bring that in spades. As I said, I understand these issues in my bones. I know what it's like to get that knot in the pit of your stomach that so many Americans have every time the Supreme Court is in session, because you're worried about which one of your basic rights could possibly be taken away or at least up for debate. As we talk about issues, the impact of COVID and the health disparities that have been exacerbated as it relates to Black and brown folks, as it relates to poor people, as we talk about the need to pass the Equality Act and non-discrimination, as we talk about the need to raise the minimum wage. It's one thing to say you support those things. It's another thing to have lived them. And there is an intangible, lived experience that is missing. When I think about everybody who's in this race or who's thinking about getting in this race, there is nobody who understands these issues in a lived way more than me, period. We have to do better than politicians every 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, whatever it is, cosplaying concerns for working people, and then crossing their fingers behind their backs because they don't really care. We don't need folks who are just, going to be centering other people's pain to say, look, this person's having a rough go of it. I'm talking about it. That's good. But what's better is allowing the person who's having a rough go of it to actually speak for themselves, because there's nuance to my life, to the lives of so many Pennsylvanians who don't look like me or love like me, but who hear my story and say, oh yeah, I know what that's like. Damn, I've been there. You can't learn all of that from a policy paper. You can't learn all of that from being briefed. Some of this stuff, you kind of just had to be there. And we don't have to teach people our concerns. Working people can speak for ourselves. And when working people step up to speak for themselves, our allies should stand with us, not stand in front of us.
And for folks who might be apprehensive, as you can understand, of politicians who say one thing during campaign season and the lead up to an election, and then do change their mind once they're 10 years in, right? How would you make that different? I know you talked about justice in your announcement video as well. How do you make justice actually real and not just talk about it?
We do it by doing what I've always done. I don't believe this campaign or anything I've done is about a cult of personality. I mean, how many times have we freaking done that? We just saw folks at CPAC bowing before a golden statue of Donald Trump with the same little bad hairdo. I don't know why they would memorialize that in a statue, but they did. And so here we are. They're bowing before the statue and they're worshiping him, the whole thing. We don't need that. I don't want people to put their hopes and dreams into me. Put your hopes and dreams into you, into what we can do when we build something together. And that is what my campaign is about. Certainly my name is on the ballot, but it's about what working people can build together. That's what I've done ever since I was a junior, block captain. I was 11 years old, living on a block in my district. And my mom was like, I came home complaining about the block. And my mom said, well, if you care so much, why don't you go do something about it? And I was like, okay.
I think you're doing something about it.
That's great. And I ran for junior block captain then, Alex. And it was the first thing I ever did in terms of being civically engaged. But like when we did community cleanups or did community events, like I didn't do it by myself. I wasn't out there just cleaning the block by myself. What we did was engage and organize other people to recognize their power. And I think that's what good leaders do best. They help other people to recognize the power that we all have, the power of our individual voices. And when we put those voices in a chorus, there's nothing that can stop us.
Speaking of that chorus, when you've got so many people looking at you, either on the good side of support or the bad side of criticism, how do you deal with that? Especially when 2021, people can reach you and tweet you and Facebook you in an instant message. How do you deal at the receiving end of so much attention, good and bad sometimes? What's that like?
I'm forgetting right now who said it, and one of your intrepid viewers will be able to figure out who said it first. But you take criticism seriously, but not personally. I recognize, because I also had a job where I was calling people to do surveys. And so it's like telemarketing, but like I wasn't selling anything. I was just trying to get people to stay on the phone to do a survey. And so it was a tough gig, but I did it anyway.
Gotta start somewhere, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I've had so many random jobs. But one of the things I sort of learned from doing that, right, when you get a bunch of people hanging up on you and everything, and it's easy to take that personally, or you pick up the phone and people are yelling at you. They're not mad at me in many cases, like personally. They're mad at a system that has failed over and over and over again. And like, it is the most natural thing in the world. If you put your hand, you learn this as a kid, right? You put your hand on a hot surface, you don't put your hand there again. And politics has been a hot surface for a lot of working families over and over again. And I think Elizabeth Warren said it best, that personnel is policy. We have to change our personnel. We keep electing folks who, went to all the right jobs. And when people talk about experience, what they're often talking about is, have you climbed the ladder of the elite institutions that don't actually give a damn about working people? And so people went to Harvard and they went to this, they went to that, they went to Yale, right? And those are the types of people we've often elected. And then we expect them to like really care about people who went to state schools. There's a disconnect there. And so I think the thing that we have to do is to elect people from the communities that are most impacted to represent those communities, as opposed to getting folks who are mascots or cheerleaders for our concerns. We don't need any cheerleaders. We need people who understand the concerns that people have. And when people who come from communities that have been most impacted step up to speak, I think we ought to listen.
It's become such a far-fetched concept. Folks who look like the community represent the community. But it's not been that way. And I think that's kind of what your point is. You want to be someone who's lived this, not read about it.
And again, like, not just look like us, but somebody who's actually been there, I've been on, as I said, both sides of these food lines. I know what it's like to literally be looking around like, what the hell are we gonna eat, to not know, to be depending on the kindness of strangers to help. And again, that's not the sort of story of sort of humble, beginnings. I know, people hear it and they say, oh, well, that's great. No, it's not. I don't want anybody else to have this experience. That's why I'm talking about it, because it's not a foregone conclusion that we have to have people living in the level of deep poverty that we're living in. That's a policy decision. And until we get more policy makers who understand the impact of that decision, we are not going to change the decision. And so people can tell you whatever they want to tell you, but I'm living proof, I'm living example of what it looks like when working people organize and stand up for themselves. I'm in office right now because a bunch of working people in my district organized and fought for me to be here. And every single day. If Pennsylvanians don't believe anything else I say, if they don't hear anything else I say, by the time this campaign is over, I think they will know that I will fight like hell for them. Every single day, I will fight like hell for them. And that is ultimately what we need.
What scares you about this endeavor, Malcolm? There's a lot that could be thrown your way, and I know you know that.
To be honest, and I've gotten this question before, I lost both of my parents before I turned 27, Alex. The worst thing that could happen to me has kind of already happened. Everything else is gravy. What scares me is what happens if good people don't do this. Right over my shoulder here is my grandfather, who's Muhammad Kenyatta, who was a civil rights activist. My grandfather, right over my shoulder, and his wife, who's right next to me, right next to him, rather, in the picture there, is my last surviving grandparent. And she called me last year. I forget like what the former president had done, right? He did something crazy. And she was almost on the verge of tears. And I've not known her to be like an emotional person. And what she said was, she said, "Baby, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry because you're fighting for some of the things that I thought we had fixed. And here you are having the same conversation. I refuse to have that conversation with my grandkids. Let's fix some of this stuff. Let's actually do something on some of these issues."
It does give you chills to even think. You kind of made me think about just what my grandmother would think about being in that position and just having that discussion. I thought we have already addressed this. Let's move away from policy and the tough, hard stuff that you focus on every day. Give me an idea of what it's like with Rep Kenyatta and Dr. Matt at home on a random Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday night. What are you guys doing to keep yourselves busy but also engaged and informed? I know you two are both crazy involved.
So it's me like dominating the TV. I am like a remote control hog. I am, it's true. And I like to use that power. I wield that power to watch a lot of baking shows, and not cooking shows. I'll be very clear, baking shows. I've seen every episode of GBBO, first GBBO heads.
Is that the Great British Bake Off? Yeah.
That's
okay.
right. Yeah.
Okay.
For people who aren't really in it, you know what I mean? And so I spend a lot of time watching that. And one of the folks who won that show, Nadia, has a new show called Nadia Bakes. And so I watched that show. I love baking, and I think I'm a good cook. I'm becoming a better baker. I'm not like I don't want to say I'm a bad baker. It's just not something I really tried my hand at. And so I've been trying to do that more. I made some like bread, and been trying to get into making cookies and other things. And so I really love being like the world's worst, probably, amateur baker.
I promise you I'm worse. I'm like those pre-made Pillsbury cookies. I can do that, and then, I tap out. When you guys are kind of having some downtime and stuff, what are some things that you worry about and then plan to, I guess, introduce into policy or take on the next day? What do you do in your downtime that's still work-related, but still is like, maybe a longer process, a longer project that, over 10 years you want to see this Commonwealth and this country hopefully move closer to?
The best thing about Dr. Matt is I think we're both like nerds. Somebody said to me, geek chic is where we're going with, and I'll take
love that. Okay.
I'll take it. His PhD is in urban planning, and so we talk a lot about what our communities could look like and be like in a way that really centers everybody, that doesn't just see communities that are struggling, as bad places, or, you hear people use some of the most degrading language talking about communities that aren't bad because bad people live there, but are bad because we've made crappy policy, decisions. And so, folks can go back and go back and Google. I've been saying this over and over and over again, that our communities are not problems to be solved. They're opportunities to be unleashed. I totally believe that. And so this idea of continuing to look at our communities from a deficit model is something that really frustrates me, because even in communities where there's a lot of economic pain, there are people who, in spite of it all, have continued to start nonprofits, do great things in the neighborhood, organize people in the community, When I think about the level of deep poverty in my district, if some people put their head under the blanket and we're just like, I'm not getting up today, like they have every right, because they're working 2 and 3 jobs and still can't make ends meet. But instead they get up and they do it all and they figure it out. And there's a level of ingenuity to that it takes, frankly, to be poor that I don't think we learn enough from. I hear all time conservatives talking about how fiscally responsible. Poor people are the most fiscally responsible people in the world because you have to be able to make it stretch and make it work. And that's something we talk about all the time. How do we look at our communities in different ways and see the value and the beauty that are in communities that have fallen on hard times or that we've ignored?
Opportunities to be unleashed. That should be on a t-shirt somewhere. I love that that phrase. So simple and yet so impactful in my mind. For the folks you've heard them, the critics who say, systemic poverty is a problem for those people and that they're just too lazy. You've heard these critics say this. What's your message moving into this upcoming election season to combat that idea and that phrase and that mentality?
I don't have a message for them at all. I have a message for the poor people who are working hard every day, who are working 2 and 3 jobs, who have thrown their hands up and said, politics can't work, won't work. I'm asking them to believe in themselves, to believe in what we can do together. Everybody's, so often you get these questions of, how do we get, Trump supporters to vote for us or this or that? And again, you want to try to earn every vote you can, but we don't spend enough time trying to get the people. After every election, yes, I look at who wins and who loses, but the number I'm always interested in are the people who, with millions of dollars spent, said, I don't believe in either of you.
Yeah.
That's the number I always think a lot about. And a lot of times those numbers are higher in poor and working class communities, and for good reason. And so my message is to them, not for the other people.
I'm going to end with something you said in your video again that I love so much. We face a question of who we want to be as a country. What does that mean to you?
I talk about this idea of a new day. And that new day for me means taking all the things America has said about herself, many of them written right here in Philadelphia in a hot summer, right? These ideas of freedom and liberty and justice and pursuit of happiness, which is our state motto, by the way. All those different things haven't always included everybody. Our founders weren't talking about everybody. They weren't talking about women. They weren't talking about people of color. They weren't talking about all of us. But every generation has stepped up to demand that promise include more of us. And a new day is about waking up in an America where all of us are included, where every single one of us are seen, where policy isn't just the plaything of folks who are well off and well connected, but it's a place that we actually go and solve problems for people who need us most to solve those problems. That's what we can do, and we do it together. We do it together.
Stronger together, as they say, right? I love that. Well, Mr. Malcolm Kenyatta, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it. I know you got a busy time these days. Such a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
That is it here for this episode of Off Air with Alex. Please like and subscribe below. We'll see all of you next time.